Welcome to MOVIMOT and Field Distributors Basic and Intermediate Training. This is Session 5. We've completed Easy Mode Startup. You've seen how relatively simple it is to get a MOVIMOT started up and to operate it in binary control mode. In the next session, we're going to transition to a more sophisticated mode called Expert Mode. We'll see how to do a startup in that mode, and we'll see how to do a number of other more sophisticated tasks. This session, however, is kind of a bridge session where we're going to look at a few miscellaneous topics and also talk about some of the tools that you're going to use in expert mode. Let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is status and error codes. How does a MOVIMOT communicate with you to indicate what its operational status is and if something has gone wrong? Well, you've probably noticed if you've been doing the actual hands-on activities that the MOVIMOT has a small indicator LED on the top of the control head. You may have also noticed that it can change color. It's actually a tricolor LED. It can be red, yellow, or green. The MOVIMOT uses this indicator to tell you its status or to indicate what's wrong if an error has occurred. It does this by a combination of colors and blink patterns. Now you may be wondering, how much can one light tell you? Well, SEW-EURODRIVE has probably taken a single LED to the limit because we actually indicate up to 18 different codes with this one indicator. That is quite a few. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm simply going to refer you to the manual. There is a chart in the manual, and you can see the beginning of it right here, that interprets all the different color and blink patterns and what they mean. I'm going to talk about just a few of the most common ones. When you power up a MOVIMOT, what will happen, assuming everything is okay with the MOVIMOT, is that the light will first of all turn on. It will be red initially, which means that the MOVIMOT isn't ready to run. It will then change to yellow, which indicates that it is now ready to run but is not yet enabled. Now, if you're in binary mode and you activate either the clockwise or counterclockwise digital input, the light will turn green and the drive will begin to operate. This will also happen if you're in RS-45 mode and you send an enable signal over the field bus or RS-45 network. So red, yellow, and green solid indicators can signify not ready, ready but not enabled, and enabled and operating. Those are the most common codes. However, if things go wrong, you will see other things such as blinking patterns and different colors. Again, I refer you to the manual to interpret those. Okay, that's fine. But what if you want more information than that one light can give you? Are there other possibilities open to you as well? And the answer is absolutely. If you need more detailed information or you want to have a textual error message, either connect the DBG60 keypad or a PC to the diagnostic port, which is right above the F1 speed setpoint dial. A keypad will display the information right on its screen, and of course a PC you will have to scan in using MOVITOOLS MotionStudio, and from there you can find out what's wrong. So there are definitely multiple possibilities open to you as far as getting more detailed status information than the light indicates. And with that, we can transition to talking about the DBG60 keypad, which has a number of uses. What does the keypad do besides displaying errors? It actually does quite a few things. First of all, you can use it to monitor the MOVIMOT state, and in the picture here you see a keypad being used for that purpose. Of course, you wouldn't do this in an operating environment, but you might do it during setup when you just want to confirm that everything is operating correctly. You can see, for example, that the keypad is telling us that the drive isn't enabled yet, and that's confirmed by the fact that the indicator light right above it is yellow. It's also telling us that the output frequency is 0 Hz, which certainly makes sense if the motor isn't running, and it says that it isn't drawing any current out of its total possible current that it can draw. So this is a MOVIMOT status display on the keypad. The keypad will display error information, so if something is wrong, you'll get a textual error message. You can also access the error memories in the MOVIMOT. The MOVIMOT actually retains the last 5 errors that have occurred, so you can go back to sort of an error history and see which errors have occurred and what the MOVIMOT state was at the time it faulted. So that can be extremely useful if you're dealing with some kind of a diagnostic scenario. You can run the drive manually. We call this manual mode, and this can be handy just to confirm that it works correctly. You can also edit parameters in the MOVIMOT, but you do have to be in expert mode to do that. And finally, you can also make backups of the MOVIMOT and use that backup to restore it if a problem occurs or to duplicate its settings to multiple MOVIMOTs. This is often done in a plant environment where you have many identical MOVIMOTs. You just set one up, get it parameterized correctly, make a backup using the keypad, and then just go down the line, dumping that backup into each individual MOVIMOT. And that's a way of duplicating its functionality across multiple units with minimal effort. Now, the DBG60 keypad is definitely a little challenging to use, and I'll admit, even as an SEW employee, that it's not my favorite one of our accessories. And the reason is it doesn't work like any other keypad I've ever used. So be aware that even though it looks very much like keypads you've seen on remote controls with a DVD player, for example, it doesn't work at all like a standard keypad. Let's go over the keys and I'll try to clarify how it works and give you a better understanding of it. First of all, the key that looks like a globe is used to select the language that the keypad displays messages in. You will only have to use this button once when the keypad is brand new, and after you've selected the language, it will just stay that way. Of course, if you have to change to a different language, then you can press the globe key and change to one of the other available languages. The button opposite it is the menus button. This will bring up the menus that the keypad has. Then you have arrow buttons. The up and down buttons work very much like they do on any keypad. However, the right and left arrows do not. The right arrow can move to the right, but it also functions as what's called the confirm key. This is very confusing because on any other keypad I've ever used, the right arrow button does not function in this way, but in this case it does. The left arrow moves to the left. It can also be used for deleting things, and it can be used for exiting certain menu options. Again, that is sort of unconventional behavior. And then the button in the middle, which on every keypad I've ever used is the Enter button, does not function that way on this keypad. This is called the Switch button, and it is used to switch between different menu options. So I would say the center button is potentially the most confusing. But now that you understand what functions the buttons have, I'm hoping you won't be quite as confused when you start to use it. Finally, we have a red button and a green button. The green button is used in manual mode to run the motor, and the red button is used to stop it. All right, so that's what the buttons do. There is a standard numeric keypad directly below these buttons, and it behaves in the way you'd expect. There's also a plus-minus button to put a sign on numbers, so nothing surprising there. Just one little tip. The OK button, which is also the right arrow, is essentially the Enter button. So even though your thumb will probably gravitate to the center button, don't. You need to press the Move Right button, which is marked OK. That is the Enter button. If you understand that, the keypad is actually fairly understandable. All right, I think a demonstration is in order. Let's use the keypad to do a few things. I'm going to use the keypad to display the status of my MOVIMOT when I operate it in binary mode, and then I'm going to drop into manual mode and show you how to run the drive manually with the keypad. And this will also give me a chance to demonstrate how the buttons work. Let's do that. All right, my keypad's connected and I've just powered up the MOVIMOT, and this is a brand new one, so it wants to know my language. I press the globe button and navigate to English and then press the OK button. And you can see it's connected and identified my MOVIMOT. And it's going to now go on to what's called the basic screen, which is sort of a status screen. You can see the MOVIMOT isn't running. I've just started it with my binary controls, and you can see it's running now. I've just turned it off. Notice the enable has just changed to no enable. Now I'm going to manual mode. I pick menu and then I navigate to manual operation. It's asking for a ramp. I hit OK to activate that option and I type in 2 and hit OK. And then I have to press the switch button to move to the speed option. And I hit OK again. I'll key in 400 RPM, hit OK, and now press the green run button. And the drive is running. You'll have to take my word for it. You can't see it running here. Stop it with the stop button. And now I'm going to go counterclockwise by keying in a negative sign. You can't see that there, but I've just keyed that in. I'll put in 125 RPM, hit OK, and press the green button. And again, the drive is running, this time the other direction. I'll hit stop, halt it, and I'm going to exit manual mode by hitting the menu button and OK to confirm exit manual mode. And I'll go back to that basic display. And there we go. All right, well, that was the keypad. You may have looked at that and said, that seemed a little laborious. And the answer is, you're right. The big advantage to the keypad is simply that it's compact and easy to take with you on a plant floor. It's much more convenient than carrying a laptop around. But you are somewhat limited in what you can do with it, and it is rather laborious to use. So, in my opinion, in most cases, you are smarter using a PC loaded with MOVITOOLS MotionStudio. We're going to talk about how you can use that as a setup and diagnostic tool. Of course, you're going to need a PC. Most people use a laptop for its portability. You'll need to have a copy of MOVITOOLS MotionStudio loaded onto it. And you will also need a USB adapter. There are two choices, the newer one, which is gray, the USM21A, and the older red USB 11A. Both of these will work with MOVIMOT. You do need to have the appropriate cable on it, and you'll need the one that looks sort of like what you would see on an old-fashioned landline phone's handset. It's sort of a small version of the RJ45 plug. You will need to have that particular cable to connect to the diagnostic port on the MOVIMOT. Now, what can you do with a PC? Well, it's definitely a lot easier than the keypad. You can do many more things and you can do them faster. You can get very detailed error information and you can look at the error memories. You can also edit the full parameter set, assuming you've switched to expert mode. You can do backups and restores, and you can do them much more easily than you can with the keypad. And there's a special tool called the scope, which is useful for diagnostics and debugging problems. It's sort of like a bench oscilloscope. You can use it to monitor the VFD and do things with it. All right, you're probably curious now what it looks like to work with MOVITOOLS MotionStudio and the MOVIMOT, so I think it's time for another demonstration. Let's do it. Okay, as you can see, I've got MOVITOOLS MotionStudio started up. I've connected my MOVIMOT to my PC using the USM21A adapter, and it's powered up, so I'm now ready to begin. To start, I need to create a project, and MotionStudio is already selected new project, so I'll just click OK, and I need to give it a name and a location. I'm just going to put it on my desktop, and I'll call it MOVIMOT class. That should work fine. Click OK. Now the first thing I need to do is get connected to my MOVIMOT, so I go over here where it says network, and you can see it's already spotted my USM21A adapter. It actually looks like a serial port to the PC, but it's also got that USB there, so I know it's the right one. I'm going to right-click on it and just click Network Scan, and it's going to go out and look for the MOVIMOT. And there we go, it's found it. This particular MOVIMOT hasn't been named, so it just comes up as unnamed. Before we do anything, let's give it a name. To do this, you right-click on it and pick Properties. And you can see it's identified it as a MOVIMOT D, and it's got information on it. It's got even the firmware here in the model. I need to give it a name. I'm going to call it MOVIMOT 1, and I'm using an underscore in that name there. It's always smart to avoid spaces and device names. So there, I've named it. Now, we're not going to do much because we're in easy mode, and in easy mode, you're very restricted what you can do through MOVITOOLS MotionStudio. We're going to save expert mode for our next session, but I do want to introduce you to the parameter tree. So we need to access the parameter tree. Now, I need to be on the Working with Unit tab, which it's done by default. If I happen to be on another tab, for example, one like this, then I would just need to click Working with the Unit. And I'm going to pick Parameter Tree and click this and it will open it up. The MOVIMOT has quite a few parameters. Some of them are read-only, meaning you can only look at them. Others are read-write, meaning you can change them as well as examine them. They're divided into groupings. You can see they're all collapsed. They're numbered 0 through 8. And if you expand one, you will see it has various branches and even additional sections you can expand under it. I'm going to confine myself right now to group 0. These are all read-only parameters. They're available so you can get information about the MOVIMOT. And the way you open a particular parameter or group is you just double-click on it. So I'm going to double-click on Process Values. And this is going to open group 0. You can see there's actually a whole group of parameters underneath that. These give you basic information about the MOVIMOT, like the speed it's running at, the frequency it's outputting, the amount of current it's using, the DC link voltage, that's the DC internal voltage. You can see, as I've told you before, it's almost 700 volts. It's 654 at the moment. So this is a pretty high voltage, and this is the reason you always have to be careful when you take the control head off. Now, since I'm still in easy mode startup and I have binary control available, I'm just going to flip the switch on my control box to start the VFD, and you can see these parameters change. You can see my speed. We've configured the MOVIMOT to run at around 1200 RPM, and you can see it's just a shade below that. It's about 60 RPM below 1200. You can also see the frequency it's outputting, 38.1 hertz, and you can see the current it's drawing. So this is purely a status display, but this is useful when you're testing a MOVIMOT to see if it's working correctly. I'll stop it here, and I'll open the next branch in the parameter tree. This is the status display. And this tells me information about my inverter. It says it's disabled and not enabled. It says there's no fault condition. It tells me it's been started up in easy mode. It's got the heatsink temperature and even tells you how many hours it's been operated. It also shows you its different switch positions. Notice I have 2 dip switches activated, PWM frequency and speed monitoring. We did that in the previous session when we configured it by flipping the dip switches. It also tells you what position the F2 and T1 dials are in. And if you want to see the F1 dial, you've got to go over here to analog set points, and it tells you that the F1 dial is turned to 3.8. Remember, we turned it just a shade below 4, so that is correct. This is just information about the MOVIMOT. If I double-click on binary inputs, it shows me my digital inputs and shows that right now none of them is turned on. I'll flip on the F1, F2 switch, and you can see that it shows a change there. See that it shows a little check mark to indicate that it's been turned on. So this is good just for testing that your digital inputs are wired correctly. Turn that off. If I go to binary outputs, it tells me what the relay is signaling, and it's associated with what's called the ready signal. Remember, when the indicator light on top of the MOVIMOT turns yellow from red, it indicates the MOVIMOT is ready to go. Well, this relay closes when that indicator comes on at yellow or green because that's signaling that it's ready. Now, I can associate other informational signals with the relay instead, and we'll do that in the next session. So this tells you what the outputs are doing. And then finally, if we go to 7 here, we have a full information about our MOVIMOT. It gives you the model, how much current it's rated at, tells you what DIMM is installed, what firmware is installed in it. It also tells you some information about the motor connected to it. So lots of useful information here. The last section of our read-only parameters that we're going to look at today are the fault memories. The MOVIMOT has 5 fault memories, numbered 0 through 4, and these tell you the last 5 faults that have occurred. It's kind of a fault history. Fault 0 is the most recent one. Fault 4 is the one that is most distant in the past. And if you pick one of these, for example, parameter 80, it will tell you not only what the fault was by giving you the fault code, the text description, and the sub-error codes. It will also give you a snapshot of key parameters at the time the fault occurred. For example, it indicates that the relay K1 was closed. It says the MOVIMOT was not enabled, that it was disabled, that the heatsink temperature was 27 degrees C, and that it wasn't actually running. The speed was 0, the current was 0. It gives you the DC link voltage. So this is just kind of a handy snapshot that can help you understand what was going on right at the time of the fault. Let me go to my next fault memory, fault number 1. This one was a communication error on the RS-485 interface, so it gives the fault code, the subfault code, and other information. You can see the DC link voltage was a little different. You can see the heatsink was different. Again, the MOVIMOT wasn't running. So this is just useful information, and if something goes wrong, it's very helpful to have. You can access the fault memory through the keypad as well, and I'll demonstrate that at another time, but I think it's more convenient to look at it in MOVITOOLS MotionStudio because you have the full convenience of a complete display rather than that tiny little display on the keypad. All right, well, that's all I'm going to show you here. All the parameters in branch 0 are read-only. We really can't do anything with the read-write parameters until we switch to expert mode. One last thing I'm going to show you is just how to clean up your screen. You notice everything we've opened here has a tab down here that you can go back to now if you want. Eventually, these pile up on your screen, so a good way to get rid of them is just to right-click on the screen and pick Close All, and then you can just collapse this branch of the parameter tree. In our next session, we're going to start exploring the other branches when we transition into expert mode. And that is the end of session 5. That was a fairly lightweight session. As I said at the beginning, this is really kind of a transition session where we get ready to move into expert mode, which is what we'll cover in session 6. So when you come back, we're going to switch our MOVIMOT into expert mode and really make it perform. See you then.